The Brooklyn Nets going into the 2025 season are kind of an enigma, and no one really knows what to make of them. Now, don't get me wrong. We know that they're going to be bad. Very bad. That's without a question. They're going to be in the contention for the number one overall pick. They're going to be terrible. But they should be a very interesting team to dissect and see what the future holds for them. Because, yes, like I said, although they're probably not going to see much on-court success, they have a ton of young guys, and they just made a historic draft where they used 5 first-round picks and actually used them, and now they have 5 first-round talents on their roster. And some people are very low on their draft class that they had, and some people are very high on it. I'm kind of in the middle. I like some of the things they did. I dislike some of the things. But overall, I don't think it was a terrible draft class. I don't think it's nearly as bad as some people were trying to make it out to be. But due to them adding so much talent through this one draft, they now have a lot to sift through and a lot to watch as they develop and see where they go, and it should just be very interesting to see how this team grows. So there's a lot of question marks around the roster as a whole. So despite the fans not having much to hope for in terms of actually being good at basketball, they should be able to look forward to at least to see the plethora of young talent on this roster develop, and maybe even develop into some cornerstone guys that they can build around going into the future. And also, being the worst team in this year's draft class coming up is not exactly bad. It is an stacked draft class this year, so they also have that to look forward to. So I do think, despite them having one of the more interesting drafts, and despite them probably not being the best team next year or even anything remotely close to a good team, I do think that there's still things to be excited for going into the season. I think a lot of questions are going to be answered, and I want to get into what I think is going to happen. I'm going to get into all their draft selections, what I think of the players, and then I'm going to get into the rest of the roster and think what they need to do with that, and then I'm even going to get into what I think the future of this team could look like. So if that does sound interesting to you, please watch the video all the way through. Hit the like button, subscribe button, and mean the absolute word to me. And without further ado, let's get right into this video. So as I said earlier, the Brooklyn Nets made headlines when they actually used all 5 first-round picks. Nobody expected that. Everybody expected them to make trades, and they very much did not do that. And with the first of their 5 first-round picks, they picked Igor Demon. Now, I think you pronounce it differently. That's how I'm going to pronounce it. Okay, I was pretty high on Igor. Now, I didn't think he was going to be a superstar or all-star, but I do think he is pretty solid. He's a tall guard with high upside, solid athleticism. I think he has pretty good two-way potential, and he has a chance to be kind of like a true point guard type guy, and he has a great size for the position as well, and I think maybe he could even move to a shooting guard if he can get better and more consistent on the offensive side of the ball. And I just think overall, Igor does have pretty high upside and could develop into a very solid player in the NBA. So although I'm not as high on him as others, I'm definitely not as low on him as others either. And I think Igor is going to be a solid NBA player when all is said and done. And then their next first round selection was Nolan Traore. Now, Nolan Traore is a hit or miss prospect to me. So he's either going to really work out or really not work out. He had a terrible start to his year last year overseas, but kind of ended pretty strongly, and he's only pretty young. I think he's like 18 or 19 years old. He's another bigger guard, and I think he's definitely more of a true point guard, especially going to be more of a true point guard early in his NBA career. But his offensive game has a chance to develop very strongly, and I think defensively he's already there. So if he can just develop and get more consistent on offense, I think their backcourt could be very interesting. Like, I think they'd have two very big guards in Igor and Nolan if it worked out, and Nolan could be point guard and Igor could be the shooting guard, and you'd have 2 very big guys with very good two-way potential who have a chance to be very solid in the league. Now, I don't think either one are going to be a star or anything like that, but I do think that they could both work out. The problem is, I think early in their careers, they're going to play very similarly, and it's going to be very difficult for them to be on the court at the same time together. And yeah, I know they're not trying to win right now, but it still, from a scheme perspective with how they're probably going to play, especially in the beginning of their NBA careers, I think it's going to be hard for them to play and share minutes, and I think they need to develop more in their own ways until you can actually share the floor with them. So I think picking Nolan Traore right after picking Igor is a interesting choice, but I can see why they did it because the vision is there. I just think it's probably at least a few years away from actually being realized, if it ever does. And then with the third first-round pick they picked Drake Powell, 22nd overall. Now, Drake Powell, I was higher on him than most. The problem with him is we have a very small sample size of what he is as a player, because he came off the bench for North Carolina last year. I was surprised he declared for the draft. I think he should have stayed in college for one more year, but I do think his potential is there, and he could be a very solid two-way player. Like, they really like these two-way type guys, and I think Drake Powell could be that. Now, he only averaged like 7 points, but his efficiencies are solid enough. I think if he can develop offensively, he has the build, he has the athleticism, he has the mentality. He just has to start developing. He's a pretty raw player, and that's kind of a common theme, at least through these first 3 picks, that they kind of have more raw to guys and they need to develop them. So if the Brooklyn Nets can develop their guys, this could be a very good draft, but it's going to be very hard to simultaneously develop this many young guys at once. But Drake Powell, in my opinion, could develop into a very solid player. Once again, don't think he has any star potential to him, but could be a very solid role player. And then they picked Ben Surhoff after that, 26 overall. And to me, Ben Surhoff is kind of like a Denny Avengita-esque player. He has that kind of upside. He's very solid. I'm high on him. I like the way he plays. He can score all 3 levels. Now, his efficiency needs to get better, but I think that's going to come over time. And I just think overall, Ben Surhoff has a chance to be probably one of the best, if not the best player out of this class for them. Now, I think Igor is probably going to be the best, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if Ben Surhoff ends up being the best out of this class. And I just think overall this is one of their better selections they made, and I think he makes sense, and he'll probably be a long-term piece going forward for them, especially if he can end up being anything like Denny Avengita currently is. And then with their last selection, they selected Danny Wolf. Now, Danny Wolf, I am extremely high on. A lot of people weren't for him, and they didn't like him in this class, but I thought Danny Wolf was probably the best center in this entire draft class. I think he's insanely talented on the offensive side of the ball. His basketball IQ is through the roof. Now, he's definitely going to have some growing pains, and especially with this being a less talented roster, his passing ability is going to be probably kind of suppressed a little bit, but I do think Danny Wolf's going to shine through. I think he has, once again, a chance to be the best player in this draft class. I love Danny Wolf. I wanted the Pelicans to draft him. He can spread the floor. He can score from all 3 levels. He can rebound, block shots. He may struggle if he gets put on the perimeter, but he's athletic enough to at least kind of make up for that. And I think his offensive upside far outweighs the downsides he has athletically and defensively. So I think overall Danny Wolf's going to be a great pick. I know a lot of people aren't the biggest fan of him, but I think he is going to be a stud for them, and I love this pick for them. So overall, with the draft got, I think they got a lot of potential in it, which, I mean, it would obviously if you drafted 5 first-round talents, but I think their biggest upsides is Igor, Drake Powell, Ben Surhoff, and Danny Wolf. And if I had to rank it, I'd probably go Igor's probably going to be the best, then Danny Wolf, then Ben Surhoff, then Drake Powell, then Nolan Traore. And I don't think they're got very bad. I think there's very real chance that they have a sleeper guy. Like, maybe Nolan Traore works out and they find their point guard of the future. That'd be very valuable. And I think Nolan Traore, ceiling is kind of a Josh Giddey. But I just think overall, they will get good players out of this draft class, and I think they will help them be successful in the future. And even if they didn't add any stars, I do think that they added very solid guys who are going to be on this team for a very, very long time. And now that I've covered their entire draft class, let's just get into the rest of this roster. The rest of the roster does have some bright spots, but it is pretty weak. They did get a recently acquired Michael Porter Jr. in the Cam Johnson trade, and on top of that, they got a first-round pick. So adding Michael Porter Jr. in a first-round pick, in my opinion, is a W for the Nets. They got draft capital plus a good player. Now, I think Michael Porter Jr. will probably be flipped at the trade deadline, probably for more picks or more young guys. But even as a player, I think he's going to give you about what Cam Johnson gave you, if not better. He's probably going to be a better, number 1 option, because he is the number 1 offensive option on this team. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if Michael Porter Jr. is averaging 23 points a game, because, I mean, he's the only guy and someone has to score, and he is a talented player. So if he's healthy, I wouldn't be surprised if he has a breakout season and they can trade him for a lot. But I think that's what he's probably going to serve as his team mainly, is be trade bait, and hopefully they hope he has a good first half of the season and a contending level team wants to trade for him later down the line. Nick Claxton is their best defensive player on the roster. He's a great defensive center in the league, very solid shot blocker, very solid offensively as well. He's just a very solid center. Now, maybe he's not in the upper echelon of great centers, and I think his ceiling is basically met at this point, but I do think a lot of teams would love to have him, and I think he's probably another trade bait type guy for this team, and I think Nick Claxton could give them a first-round pick from a contending level team. Like, a team like the Los Angeles Lakers would probably kill to have a guy like Nicholas Claxton on their roster, so I wouldn't be surprised if they try to trade for him at all. And then Terrence Mann, who they also got in a trade this year. Like Terrence Mann, he's probably going to be the starter for them at guard. He's young, he's still talented, and maybe they keep him long term just because he is talented and his age isn't too bad. But I would imagine he's probably going to be more of a trade piece again because this team is probably going to fire sell all their like non-super young guys. And I think this would be their probably ideal situation. I think Terrence Mann is good enough for you to get like at least some draft capital or maybe some flyer on a young guy. And I think that would probably be better use of Terrence Mann than trying to use him long term because although he is a great player, I don't think he's going to be a star or anything ever in the future. So I think it's better to probably look to trade him. Noah Clowney probably will be their short-term starting power forward and their long-term backup power forward. He's fairly talented. He's probably not talented enough or highly valued enough throughout the league to trade. I would rather keep him. I think he still has a little bit of upside to go. I liked him out of Alabama, and I think overall he's probably going to be a pretty solid player for them this year. Nothing special, but should be decent for them. And as the starting power forwards go, not going to be one of the best, but not going to be one of the worst either. And I think Clowney overall should be able to give them good minutes and probably is going to be a long-term, at least role player for this team. Jalen Wilson is someone I really liked that they drafted 2 years ago out of Kansas, and in my opinion, he's going to be a very solid player for them. He's been very good in the G League. He gave them good minutes last year. I think he's going to continue to improve as he just got basically a full year with them under his belt, and I think he's going to continue to improve, become a very good two-way guy, maybe even one of their key players off their bench, or maybe even a starting level player this year. I like Jalen Wilson a lot, and I think they got a very good player in him. And then lastly, Cam Thomas, although he is not currently signed to them under a contract, it is looking more and more likely that he is going to return to the Nets on like a $6 million deal on the qualifying offer because nobody wants him. And I mean, although Cam Thomas isn't really conducive to winning, he is going to probably be your second best, if not your best offensive option if he does re-sign with you. So that's why I'm putting him here, and maybe you can trade him for at least something at the trade deadline if he improves, but it seems like teams really don't value his skill set, which I mean, I can't blame them. He is kind of a selfish type player and not being talented enough to be that, and that's just the way he plays. But I do think Cam Thomas is at least notable enough to have to talk about, so he will probably be on the roster, and he probably will be one of their best offensive players going into next season. And with most of their bright spots being potential trade pieces, their also future draft capital is very, very solid. So I think the future of this team is going to be pretty good because, like, overall, yes, you have lots of draft capital going into the future. You have, like, 2 first-round picks for most of the next upcoming draft classes, I'm pretty sure. You have guys like Claxton and Michael Porter Jr., who you can legitimately flip for very tangible assets, on top of players like Cam Thomas and even Clowney maybe, and Terrence Mann, who you can flip around. I don't think Clowney, but mainly Terrence Mann, and that you could probably flip for picks, and I think that would be big. So I think they're going to have a legit runway and a legit roadmap, like, make some solid trades, get more draft capital, get more young guys, and just start building from there once you start figuring out how good some of the current young guys on your team are going to be. So with this kind of overview and umbrella view of this entire team as a whole, what is next for the Brooklyn Nets? What should they do? The first thing I think they need to do is they need to look to trade their current higher value guys. Like, I think they 100% should trade Claxton and Michael Porter Jr. without a doubt. And I would also trade Terrence Mann, but definitely the first 2 guys I mentioned because you can get a lot for them. I think a lot of teams would trade you a lot for them, and I just think long-term wise, they don't fit your timeline anymore, and you just have to trade them. And it makes more sense to trade them. You're not trying to win now. There's no point in having these talented guys on your roster. Then they need to find out with their current young guys from like Clowney, Wilson, and their entire draft class this year, who's good and who's not, who can they build around, who's going to be the cornerstone pieces going forward, and who's probably just going to be rotational guys that probably won't be here for the long haul. You have to figure that out, and I think that's what this season should be for. Give your young guys as many minutes as possible, let them develop as much as possible, let them fail as much as possible, and just see who is going to be there for the long term. And then after that, you just have to pray to the lottery gods that you're bad and that you get the first overall pick and that you can get the most talented through the draft as humanly possible. And then just build from there. Hopefully you can get a superstar in the draft. Hopefully you get enough role players through the draft. And then you can go from there. You're Brooklyn, so you're probably going to be doing fairly good in free agency if you want to. And you should be able to build from there. Now, the Nets historically aren't the best at building teams, but I think they do have a roadmap going forward, and they do have things that they can't control, but they also have a lot of things that they can control. So overall, I think the future of the Nets could be pretty good if they play their cards right, and I think it should be pretty good because it is a pretty obvious thing that their next few moves should be. So as long as they draft good and develop good, the team should honestly be just fine, especially if they make good trades with some of the other pieces they have on their roster currently. But unfortunately, guys, that's going to be it for this video. So comment below. Do you agree with me? Do you think the Nets' future is bright? Do you think it's bad? How good or bad do you think they're going to be this year? All your thoughts in the comment section below. If you like, point the like button, subscribe button, so right to me, and I hope you have a blessed day. Because I had a blessed day, so you need to have a blessed day. All glory to God. See you in the next video. Goodbye. Boo. Blah.